If I told you that you would have to spend nearly $90,000 this year and quite a few years into your retirement just on taxes, would you do it if I could save you up to $1 million that you would be paying the federal government? Now, this is actually pretty insane, but it's something that I just went through with a client. We talked through this and we're looking at different scenarios on how to help do estate planning and tax planning for them. Check this out. Total federal tax paid, $88,000, $95,000, $85,000, $73,000, $80,000, $79,000. These are some massive tax bills for a lot of people and for these people as well. Nobody wants to do that. But what we've got to look at here is their overall plan. We're going to use Nest Egg, what we use here for clients with financial planning. And we're going to walk through this. We're going to look at their scenario specifically, where they're at, and how potentially they could save a massive amount of money. And so if we're looking here, we've got Mr. and Mrs. Rogers, 55 and 59 years old. As far as things go, they don't really have any income. Mrs. Rogers just retired. They've got Social Security. This just shows you that, they've had a good income. They've had a nice income coming in. $3,071 on Social Security going to be paid out. Full retirement age estimate there. For Mr. Rogers, $3,185. But then here's a cool one. I talk about pensions quite a bit. And with this pension, Mr. Rogers gets $81,805 with a 3% increase here. Now, as we always talk about with the pensions as well, there's a 50% survivor benefit. So that means if something were to happen to Mr. Rogers, Mrs. Rogers gets 50% of that. So you've got to make sure that we're planning for that accordingly as well. Now, going on through the rest of the plan here, though, they've got some goals. They're wanting to live a little bit, and that's great. I'm telling them, hey, you got to live here. You've got the money saved up, and I'm going to show you that. So we've got Mr. and Mrs. Rogers are both retired. They're spending $5,700 a month in retirement. They've got healthcare costs, long-term care costs. They're planning the last 2 years of the plan for each of them to pay out-of-pocket assisted living and in-home care. So just some things there that they're planning for the just in case. They've got some car goals for both of them. They've got a sports car goal. Check that out. And they've got go-go years. We talk about doing some go-go years. So 18,000 from 2024 till age 75. And then some slow-go years where they're going to spend 12,000 from 76 to 83. That's on top of their general monthly expenses. And then you have various one-time expenses. We talk sometimes about the idea of, what if, maybe the roof needs replaced, or maybe there's the huge trip you want to do, a one-off here and there, or the AC goes out. These are the big unexpected expenses that could possibly come into the plan that they're wanting to make sure they're accounting for, and they have in this situation. Then they have the primary home relocation. They're considering relocating in the retirement years. And so now let's take a look at their actual net worth and what we're looking at here and what we're going to be working with. They've done a great job. They've got $3.2 million in net worth, almost $3.3. They've got their house property. They've got some other assets here that's looking to be sold off eventually. This is Mr. Rogers' other sports car that he's looking to sell off there. But then you've got investments. You've got $2.5 million on the investment allocation. Now, so if we're looking here at their plan and we want to say, okay, how does this look? Well, if we're looking at everything, this looks beautiful just looking at the overall plan. You've got 100% probability of success in $3.789 million, or 99% in $5.6 million at the end of life. Now, the unique thing here in this scenario is that we're looking at clients who aren't planning specifically for leaving this to kids. And so they don't have children to leave this to, but they do have some family that they say, hey, we want to be able to help them out. We have some charities that we want to also help out as time goes on. But they could technically live quite a bit more. I'd always talk about having you at a, roughly 90% probability of success is oftentimes a good sweet spot, because the Monte Carlo is oftentimes more conservative. But this big discrepancy in here in the amount of cash at the end of the plan is the current allocation they have right this second is almost 100% stocks. And now if we go to a moderate, you're looking at more of a 60-40% allocation through the rest of time, now that they're both retired, and looking here at the fact that they don't need to take that risk. And so that's what we always want to talk about as well, because if there's a market pullback or anything else, if you've got $3 million invested and you have a 20% pullback, that's a dagger to the heart. That's like $600,000 coming out, and you're looking at your account now and you're significantly down. Well, what if you just pull it back a little bit at times, especially when the market's already really high and you don't need that extra risk? And then you could say, hey, you know what? I can weather the storm a bit, and you don't have those chest pains that maybe take you out of your plan even earlier than you expected. So this is what we're looking at here, and we've got a distribution proposal. The distribution proposal is what I want to show you on the tax strategy. So if we're looking at this tax strategy, the first part of this is I said, okay, well, let's look at, what happens if you don't pay or you don't do any Roth conversions. If you weren't doing any Roth conversions, you can see we just have a baseline here. This is your proposed strategy. And as you can see, as time goes on, what's going to end up happening is you have this massive mountain that you're climbing from about the time that RMDs start, required minimum distributions, until the end of life. The reason for that is because you're not doing Roth conversions, you have a lot of pre-tax dollars, and you're going to get yourself in a little bit of a pickle paying the government. Now, how much you're actually going to pay the government? Well, let's take a look here and see. So if we're looking at the tax details, you're going to pay $17,000, $16,000, $25,000. You have a few up years where they're having some higher goals. But then we come down here and we're having $41,000, $35,000. We have a couple years here, 80 and 86. Part of that is only because we've got retired Roger here passing away a little bit early in the plan. But then one thing that's concerning here, or actually that's a $40,000 there. So you've got that. But then eventually retired Roger's wife, Mrs. Rogers, she's actually going to hit here where she's taking her RMDs at age 75. She's going to start taking RMDs and have 80,000, 86, 91, 97, 104, 116, 117. Can you imagine the tax liability on this scenario? So what ends up happening is we want to now flip this on its head and say, hey, if we can really take advantage of the situation they're in now with a married filing jointly tax bracket, how much can we save them? Well, just to give you an idea, looking at just this breakdown here, what I did was there's actually a cool little button. I actually cheated. And then I pulled this to an Excel spreadsheet and I calculated up the sum of what the total amount of taxes would be paid for the life of the plan. And it was $2,226,527 if they don't do any conversions. That's how much you're handing to Uncle Sam. So then we looked at it and we said, okay, what happens? What's the best scenario here on conversions? Well, at 10%, Mr. Rogers is already getting a nice pension. There's really not much of an opportunity here. But if we look at a 12 to 15%, okay, you're getting somewhere, but you're still going to, have a large mountain to climb when it comes to things because you're not converting much. Then you have the 22% and you're saying, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And what we actually found was the 24% is the sweet spot in this plan. So 24% to 28% brackets for conversions. So if I come over here now and I look, I'm talking just what I had mentioned at the beginning of the video is 88,000, 95, 85, 73, 80, 79. You're having a lot of taxes going out in the early years. But then eventually that starts to slow down significantly. And look here, the last few years of the plan, RMDs have started and you're still only paying $30,000 instead of $80,000 or $90,000 in taxes. And remember, if we were looking at the other plan, there was a lot of taxes being paid, not just 5 or 6 years like we're looking at here with the conversions. And so looking at this, a lot of what the tax liability is actually going to be is only from the pension that's going to be coming in, the Social Security that's coming in there, because we can actually compare, and we're going to have a little bit of a brokerage account remaining at the end of life there. So that could be potentially some of the other assets that are having to have taxes paid. But now what amount that's going to be. So let me just show you here. Remember, I did the little cheat thing and I downloaded this. And so it was $1,372,932. So nearly $1 million saved just by doing this strategy for them and this scenario. Now, it may not be specifically your scenario, but let me know in the comments below. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this and if this is something that you would do.